When the Fallout show first got announced, I was really curious to see what kind of guns they would include. Since it's live action, I expected them to stay away from all the goofy cartoonish nonsense in Fallout 4 and go for real guns instead. Not only because it would be more true to the West Coast Fallout games, but also from a practical standpoint. Real guns are cheaper than making fake props. And besides, the guns in Fallout 4 are so stupid and non-functional that it would surely be impossible to recreate. Oh my god. I can't believe they did it. They made the Fallout 4 assault rifle into a real thing. Honestly, that's kind of impressive. They somehow materialized this abomination out of thin air. Or really, it's just a 3D printed prop. Ain't no way these guys actually mutilated a real Lewis gun, all for the sake of making this thing. If they did, then well, I'm gonna Right when I saw that picture, I knew the guns in the Fallout show were gonna be another big fat load of Bethesda baloney. Well, I mean, to be fair, they did add in a bunch of real guns, which is awesome to see. But at the same time, there's still plenty of big stinkers. I know that most people may not see a problem with these guns, but to me, it's like seeing a car with triangles for wheels, or like watching a boomer trying to figure out how to use a smartphone. It's just not very immersive. So that's why for this video, I want to show y'all my perspective by going over everything wrong with these guns. And here's a spoiler. There's a lot. Not only was this made by Hollywood, but it was overseen by Bethesda, which makes for the perfect combination of people who know nothing about firearms. As expected, there's a boatload of boneheaded mistakes. So for this video, I'm gonna analyze the guns in Fallout Season 1, and then rank them based on their overall design and implementation. By that, I mean I'll be rating these guns based on factors such as functionality, aesthetics, and in-universe lore. I'll also be examining the character's technique to see how competent they are with the firearm. Let's get started with the good old 10mm pistol. Not the one from Fallout 4, I'm talking about the 10mm from Fallout 1 and 2, which is referred to as the Colt 6520. I was glad to see they included it in the show. It's a nice nod to the classic games, but I'm not going to give this gun a pass simply because it was made by Black Isle. Nobody is immune to my wrath. So while this gun is a certified hood classic, it is also a certified boneheaded design. This is a revolver, but it somehow holds 15 rounds. Like, come on, these guys can't even count. Revolvers typically have a 5 or 6 shot cylinder, but I suppose this one could hold 8. Definitely not 15 though. The cylinder would be comically huge. But as it turns out, this revolver doesn't hold the rounds in the cylinder. It's fed by a magazine. Yep, they fell for the meme. It's a high-capacity magazine-fed assault revolver. Obviously, that wouldn't actually work. Everyone knows that you don't feed a revolver with a magazine. That's what the cylinder is for. But okay, before anyone says it, there are some extremely obscure prototypes, such as the Dardic and the Landstead 1900. With these guns, the rounds are initially loaded by a magazine, but instead of going directly into the chamber, they get fed into a cylinder, and then the cylinder has to rotate before it can fire. But all that does is add an extra step to the loading process, which makes the gun more complicated and more prone to failure. They're also a nightmare to maintain and unjam, while sporting no advantage over a regular self-loading pistol. So, to no one's surprise, both of these magazine-fed revolvers flopped horribly. They were a complete failure to launch, because the concept itself is an absolute joke. So while a magazine-fed revolver is technically possible, it is also completely pointless. Either way, they didn't even bother to make this gun functional. It has no way of ejecting any casings. There's no slide, no ejection port, or anything. You can't swing out the cylinder to manually remove them either. The cylinder is fused into the gun, so you would have to disassemble the whole thing to unload it. That's why we never see this gun get reloaded a single time throughout the show, because it can't be reloaded. It's a non-functional 3D printed prop. The 6520 from Fallout 4 does have a slide, and it ejects casings, so I don't see why they completely forgot about that key detail for the show. Well, I mean, it's probably because they based it directly on the original design from Fallout 1, which doesn't have a slide or any way of ejecting casings. Turns out, the reason for this non-functional design is due to a miscommunication between the artist and writers of Fallout 1. It was supposed to be an automatic revolver, much like the Webley Fosbury and the Mateba Unica. They are self-cocking revolvers, meaning they automatically load the next round and cock the hammer, much like a typical self-loading pistol. But of course, they don't have magazines. They're still revolvers. So that means you get the crispy trigger of a single action, the speed and convenience of a double action, but also the ruggedness of a revolver. That design concept would have made the 6520 quite an awesome gun, but unfortunately, the term automatic revolver was misinterpreted. The artist thought it meant that it was like a regular automatic handgun, but with a cylinder placed in there for no reason. So as a result, they made a magazine-fed revolver. I guess the developers thought it was funny, because nobody bothered to correct them. They kept the design for Fallout 2, and Bethesda brought it back with a Creation Club DLC for Fallout 4. Besides it being a magazine-fed revolver, it's also got this big foregrip under the barrel, which is completely useless, because you don't hold a pistol with your offhand under the barrel. You hold it with both hands on the pistol grip, which is exactly how it's used in the games and in the show. So I don't see why they slapped a big foregrip on there. It's purely dead weight. Now if this foregrip were to be paired with the stock, then that would make sense, because then you could hold it and use it like a rifle. But in its default pistol configuration, then no, it shouldn't have this big foregrip. It's also uncharacteristic for this gun to have zero recoil, when 10mm is known for being spicy. Especially during this scene with Thaddeus, the gun simply does not move, so that was really terrible choreography on his part. It's also mega cringe how he's slapping the trigger like a baboon. That's a prime example of how not to pull a trigger. You don't slap it with the middle part of your finger. You're supposed to hug the trigger with the tip of your finger. All it takes is a tiny, precise movement, and the gun goes boom. The less movement there is, that means you're going to be more accurate. This overly bombastic trigger slapping is just hilariously bad. I can see how it makes some level of sense, because the character Thaddeus clearly has no points in the gun skill. He mag dumps, or cylinder dumps at close range, and he misses every single shot. So as it turns out, this scene is very realistic. If you slap the trigger like that, you will most certainly not hit your target. At the same time, I don't see why Thaddeus would have zero training, considering that he's a Brotherhood squire. Like, are you seriously telling me that they don't train their soldiers how to shoot? Well, that doesn't make any sense. I do like the overall aesthetic they were going for. It's got a good style to it, and I can appreciate that they were true to the classic games, but they were being true to a mistake. It's honestly really disappointing to see that nobody has bothered to correct it. Over 27 years later, the 6520 has unfortunately never been depicted in its full glory. This gun would be so much better if they made it into an automatic revolver, like what was originally intended. As is, the Colt 6520 has got some major flaws, so my very best offer is one bottle cap. I can't say I hate it though, it does have potential, and it's also a really big meme, so I'll also put the classic 10mm in meme tier. Okay, now we can look at the Fallout 4 10mm. I can applaud the showrunners for making a very game-accurate prop, but that doesn't change the fact that this gun design is absolutely terrible. The main problem with this gun is that it's morbidly obese and extremely ugly. It's super bubbly, like a cartoon gun, so I can't take it seriously. Like, it seriously looks exactly like a Nerf gun. They just painted it gray. Somehow, it manages to be even less functional than a Nerf gun, because the slide doesn't move, meaning it wouldn't cycle ammunition. It does have a moving slide in Fallout 4, but I guess for the show, these guys didn't want to put in the work to make a prop with functional moving parts, probably because they thought nobody would notice. Well, that's too bad, because I noticed. Even if this gun were functional, its excessive weight would make it handle like a brick. It's an all-metal pistol, so combined with its sheer volume, this thing would probably weigh about 7 or 8 pounds, which may not seem like that much, but for a pistol, that's freaking huge. It's 4 times heavier than average. Yeah, this thing's got the same ergonomic potential as a tungsten metal cube. Really, the only reason why the actors can use it is because the prop itself is probably made of LARP foam. Of course, more weight does help reduce recoil, but for 10mm, there's not much reason to go over 3 pounds. It's just diminishing returns past that point. But despite how terrible the handling is, Maximus jerks this pistol all over the place like it's nothing. He did the same jerking motion with the 6520 earlier. For some reason, this guy likes to jerk his gun forward before shooting, which is a rather terrible habit, because all that motion will make you miss your target. I mean, to be fair, these shots were made under stress, so that impulsive jerking motion is understandable. But the fact that he's always able to hit a headshot, despite his excessive jerking, is absolutely baffling. This guy needs to go gambling with this kind of luck. Given the whole context of the show, I think it's pretty clear that Maximus invested all of his points into luck. He's a pure idiot savant build. Either that, or maybe he's a synth with aimbot. Whoops, I think I just spoiled Season 2. Meanwhile, when Lucy uses it, it has so much raw stopping power that it's able to launch a ghoul into outer space. Like holy moly, this shot especially is absolutely comical. You can't even call it stopping power anymore. This gun's just got straight up fucking launching power. Obviously, that's not how bullets work. 10mm may be a little bit spicy, but it doesn't have quite enough power to break the law of inertia. Out of all of the pistols in Fallout, this one is by far the worst. I was really hoping they would use the 10mm from Fallout 3 and New Vegas instead. I mean, it's still way oversized, but it does have the right style. If they slimmed it down and made it more similar to the Desert Eagle prototype, which is what it's based on, then it would be an awesome gun. As for the Fallout 4 10mm, well, there's no salvaging this one. It needs to get tossed out. I've grown to dislike this design even more over the years, so I'm gonna drop the rating to 1 bottle cap and place it in D tier. And you know, the excessive weight wouldn't be such a hindrance if this was supposed to be a power armor only sidearm. But no, we never see this gun being used by power armor. They seriously want us to believe that this giant brick is meant to be used by infantry. But it's so heavy that you might as well mount it on a tank. And speaking of tanks, that really makes me want to play some War Thunder. That's right, boys. War Thunder is back for more as today's sponsor. If you like military history, or just blowing up other players with cool military vehicles, then oh boy, War Thunder is a must-play. It's easily the most comprehensive vehicular combat game out there. They got tons of tanks, planes, and warships from every major country and every time period, all of which are very realistic. The vehicles are a blast to use, and the atmosphere really makes you feel like you're taking part in an epic historical battle. It's also not a typical PvP shooter where everyone just has static health bars. You gotta aim at the vehicle's weak points to deal damage. Not only does this reward skill, but it's also very immersive. The best part is that War Thunder is free to play and available on every system: PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. To make that deal even better, all new and returning players who haven't played in 6 months will receive a free bonus pack when they use my link in the description. Instead of the Fallout 4 10mm serving as a sidearm for power armor, we have the new T60 pistol. When I say it's new, well, it's not really brand new, because it's literally just a Desert Eagle with a bunch of random junk slapped onto it. What do these parts do, you may ask? Absolutely nothing. It's just random visual flair to make the gun look more sci-fi. But really, it just looks like a load of crap. And once again, they didn't bother to make this gun functional. The slide doesn't move. It's completely static. Like, come on, that's 3 strikes in a row. These guys can't get a single pistol right. But unlike the other pistols, they did at least remember to make the gun eject casings. But where exactly are those casings coming from if the slide isn't moving? I don't know, man. They just phase right through solid metal, I guess. Even better, the casings eject straight backwards at fucking sonic speed. But what's especially heinous is that they just took off the iron sights, because as we all know, aiming is totally overrated. So that's why Maximus can't hit jack shit with this gun. With the other 2 pistols, he was able to flawlessly hit his targets dead on, despite lacking discipline. But with this pistol, he misses every single time. So in this case, I don't think it's a skill issue, or a luck issue. This gun just sucks because you can't aim with it. I really don't see why they had to mutilate a perfectly good Desert Eagle, because the Desert Eagle is already in Fallout. It was present in all of the classic games, so there's no reason for them to modify it. The Desert Eagle fits into Fallout as is. But if they still wanted to modify it, then all they had to do was extend the trigger guard so that it could be used by power armor. They certainly have the right idea here. I think it would be super badass if the Desert Eagle served as a power armor sidearm. That would make the most sense, seeing as the Desert Eagle is a little bit too unwieldy and impractical for infantry. But with power armor, that hefty weight and excessive recoil isn't a problem. So of course they'd want a big-ass 50 cal sidearm for a walking tank, because why not? Or at least, that's how it should work. But in the show, this gun still has high recoil when being used by power armor. Well, sometimes it does have recoil, and sometimes it doesn't. The first time Maximus uses it, the gun doesn't move, which is how it should work. But not really, because even though the arm wouldn't move, the mass of the slide reciprocating would still cause the gun to recoil by itself. That's just basic physics. But of course, this gun doesn't have a moving slide, so it stays perfectly still. Then in this scene, Maximus jerks the gun backwards after every single shot, except on the second shot, which seems like a fault on the editor's part. They creeped in an extra shot when the actor was clearly not pulling the trigger. So as you can see, this gun makes zero sense. It completely defies the laws of physics, and it has Schrodinger's recoil. Like I said, I do like the concept, but they tried way too hard to make this gun look unique, when it was completely unnecessary. It's honestly kind of insulting how they took such a beautiful, iconic firearm and ruined it with greebly nonsense. Best I can do here is 2 bottle caps. The T60 pistol goes into C tier for now, but it could have easily been S tier if they just kept it as an authentic Desert Eagle. Now the first real gun we get a good look at is the Sterling submachine gun. It's a real-life gun of course, so I have no issues with its design. What I do have a problem with is how terrible Lucy's technique is. She's gripping the gun by the magazine, which is not recommended because it may cause unnecessary jams. So that's why soldiers were trained to shoot these guns with the left hand under the barrel shroud, which is, you know, how you shoot pretty much every other gun ever made. Her aiming technique is pretty terrible too, because she is very clearly not looking down the sights. Her line of sight is way too damn high. It's not like she would be able to see the sights either way, because her eyes are closed, which is obviously not a very effective technique for precision. Of course, that's a joke. She does have her right eye open. But either way, she shouldn't be shooting with one eye closed. Not at this range. Shooting with one eye closed is definitely better for long-range precision. But for close quarters, no. Shooting with both eyes open is the proper technique because it allows for more situational awareness and faster target acquisition. To be as fair as possible, Lucy does say that she's not very good with guns, so her novice technique would be understandable given that context, but at the same time, her aim on target is basically perfect, so I guess she was just being humble when she said that. In reality though, that would be a true statement, because she really has no clue how to use a firearm, and she would miss this target entirely. What I'm even more confused about is, what the hell is a Sterling doing in America in the first place? The Sterling was never adopted by the United States, so I don't know why this vault would seemingly have a whole stockpile of them. Of course, anything could happen in this alternate timeline, but either way you look at it, I think it would be much more characteristic for them to have classic American SMGs, like the M3 or the M76, maybe even a couple Tommy guns. That would be pretty cool. So overall, the gun itself is fine. The only problem is that the actors aren't using it correctly, and it really shouldn't be so prominent in this setting. My very best offer is 4 bottle caps and an A tier placement. Before we move on to the next gun, I wanted to say I noticed that they're using real-life ammunition boxes. They got 2 boxes of shotgun shells, one from Federal and the other from Winchester, while the one in the middle is 9mm, made by Cellier and Bellet. Or, excuse me, Cellier and Bellet, if you want to do the frog eater pronunciation. When I saw that, I instantly did the DiCaprio pointing meme, because that's the ammunition I use for my handguns. So I thought that part was pretty cool, because they're using real-life ammunition boxes, instead of the generic lame ammunition boxes that we see in Fallout 4. So you know what? The first S-tier rating goes to the ammunition boxes. The next one up really isn't a firearm, but it is a projectile weapon, so I guess I'll include it. I'm talking about the Tranq pistol, of course. I really don't have anything to say about the design of this gun. It looks legit enough to me. But what I can say is that its effectiveness is grossly exaggerated. When Lucy shoots her first raider, the dart hits him so hard that it stops him dead in his tracks as if it has the same stopping power as a .45. Not only that, but the tranquilizer takes effect immediately. In reality, this measly dart would have barely any stopping power, and the tranquilizing effect would not kick in for at least a few minutes. So yeah, this raider would have tanked this dart like a mosquito bite and would have killed Lucy. But of course, that's not how it panned out, because this is Hollywood, and all the main characters have serious amounts of plot armor. Seriously, this same exact Tranq gun is completely useless against Cooper. He tanks a dart right in the chest and it does literally nothing, which would make perfect sense. It probably didn't pierce all the way through his clothes, and even if it did, the tranquilizer wouldn't take effect for several minutes. So as it turns out, this scene is very realistic, but the one with the raider, not so much. If I really want to give them the benefit of the doubt, then maybe this is some super drug that is scientifically engineered to have an immediate effect. And apparently, Cooper is just immune to tranquilizers because he's a drug addict. I really don't think that reasoning holds up though, because that would imply that he abuses this specific drug to make him build up an immunity to it. But really, it's just a prime example of plot armor. Overall, the Tranq pistol feels pretty mid. The main downside is how unimmersive its effectiveness is. So the best I can do here is 3 bottle caps and a B tier placement. Ah yes, the glorious junk jet. This thing is an obvious joke weapon. Its design is complete nonsense, an amalgamation of random parts that don't actually work, but it still manages to spit out whatever you put into it. I do think it's pretty funny that you can kill people with teddy bears or even doll limbs, just like we see in the show. But in all seriousness, this weapon is very stupid. Not much thought was put into the functionality of its design, and it's straight up repulsive to look at. So it doesn't deserve a single bottle cap, but it is a funny meme gun, so I'll put it in meme tier. A short note about the double barrel. I really appreciate how they went with a real gun instead of using the goofy cartoon prop in Fallout 4. I also love that they show how powerful a 12 gauge is at point blank. It's so powerful that it can pop a skull like a birthday balloon. It's really not even that much of an exaggeration. 12 gauge can most certainly blow a head into little pieces. So it's kind of weird how in this scene with a sawn off double barrel, a point blank shot doesn't absolutely wreck this ghoul's skull. It's just a regular sized bullet hole. Maybe this guy was using the infamous Raider teeth loads or something. I don't know. But I'll just pretend like this scene never happened, because I want to give this double barrel 5 bottle caps and an S tier rating. To open up episode 2, we get an epic shot of a Gatling turret, missing hundreds of shots at close range. Like holy moly, this is just laughably bad. Come on guys, this is an automated turret with an AI targeting system, so it should be dead on accurate, especially at this range. When it comes to real-life automated guns, they can hit targets from a mile away, so there is no excuse as to why this gun missed literally every single shot when its targets are that close, and only jogging at a brisk pace. I know the turrets in-game aren't very accurate either, but that's total BS as well. They're simply made that way to make the game easier for noobs. In reality, this turret would have absolutely shredded Mr. Enclave guy and Dogmate into little bite-sized pieces. But of course, this show has copious amounts of plot armor, so it misses every single shot like the average stormtrooper. Like it perfectly shoots a silhouette around them. I really hate this trope in media, where they depict miniguns as being terribly inaccurate, because they aren't. I mean, they certainly aren't precise per shot like a sniper rifle, but the sheer volume of bullets guarantees that you're gonna hit your target. I also despise how they fall for the classic trope of forcing a minigun to spin up for several seconds before it can fire, when in reality, miniguns fire instantly. Or, if you want to get real technical about it, there is a very slight delay as the first round is being loaded, but it all happens so fast that it's not really noticeable. So the design of this turret looks fine, and I do think it's cool how they introduced a minigun-style turret to the franchise, but the fact that they made it completely useless, all for the sake of plot armor, is genuinely irritating. 0 bottle caps. F tier. Next, I want to take a look at Cooper's custom revolver, which is easily the coolest gun in the entire show. It doesn't have an official name, it's simply referred to as the Ghoul's revolver. So I propose that we name it the Massive Steel. I do think it's very badass. However, it is also extremely nonsensical and kind of cursed. It may look like an American-made old Western revolver, but as it turns out, this gun is Russian. It's a revolving shotgun called the MTS-255. It was never imported to America. So no, it really doesn't make any sense to see it here in the States. But I can see why the showrunners included it, because it looks cool, and it fits the gunslinger theme. And to really make it gunslingable, they sawed off the barrel and the stock, effectively turning it into a pistol. They took the modifications even further by converting it into a rocket gun. Seriously, it shoots gyrojets, which are basically mini rockets. And yes, this technology is real. Gyrojet prototypes were made way back in the 1960s, but they never caught on, mainly because they were way too expensive, and not very practical. They are super cool, but there's not much reason to buy a gyrojet round, when you can buy 100 rounds of 7.62 for the same price. It's about the same price as an RPG, so it would have to be able to take down a whole tank for it to be worth it. Perhaps if this technology was developed further, it could have been made into a pocket-sized anti-tank gun, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. In the show, this round is very powerful. It explodes on impact like a rocket, which is not how real gyrojets work. They don't explode like rockets, they're just powered like rockets. But perhaps in this timeline, they upgraded them to have tiny explosive warheads, you know, to make a pocket-sized anti-material pistol. That seems like a pretty cool idea. But maybe all of what I said was completely wrong, because when the ghoul reloads this gun, we can see that this ammunition uses casings, which doesn't make any sense. This is like seeing a guy having to take casings out of an RPG, because gyrojets shoot the whole thing. There is no casing. The projectile and the fuel is all contained in one package, like a rocket. If we look at the projectile itself, well, we see that it never burns like a gyrojet while in flight. So as it turns out, this is not a gyrojet at all. That was me just spreading misinformation on the internet. And yet, the projectile still has stabilizing fins as if it were a rocket, when it's not. And what's especially funny is that these stabilizing fins are completely unnecessary. Gyrojets don't have stabilizing fins. They don't need them because the projectile is already stabilized by itself. They can't have fins anyway because they need to be shot down a barrel. And this should be very obvious, but if you have all of those fins jutting out, then the projectile won't be able to pass through the bore. So, I don't know, man. This ammunition is some kind of magical hybrid between gyrojet and conventional ammunition. Well, the actual explanation for all of this is that these guys were trying to make a rocket gun, but they have no clue how rockets work. Either way, I'm sure we can all agree that it's complete Hollywood bullshit how this gun clearly only holds 4 rounds, and yet Cooper can shoot it 6 times before having to reload. But really, it shouldn't shoot 4 or 6 rounds, because the MTS-255 has a 5-shot cylinder, and it's not a break action either. It's a typical swing-out cylinder. And while it's really cool to see Cooper fan the hammer like a gunslinger, it is completely unnecessary, because this gun has a double-action trigger. You don't have to pull back the hammer manually, and yet Cooper treats this gun as if it's single action only. At this point, with all of these modifications and inconsistencies, I think it's better to assume that this gun is supposed to be a post-war handmade weapon, rather than a pre-war Russian import. I mean, it's not like these guys imported a real MTS-255 and then modified it into this abomination. That's just not an option. In the United States, you can't import foreign-made firearms. It's illegal. So instead, they made a 3D printed fantasy gun, which isn't exactly an MTS-255. It's just heavily inspired by it. And just like the other 3D printed props, this one is completely non-functional. The cylinder doesn't even spin. But if it were functional, and we assume that it's a single action, then yes, fanning the hammer is a very legit technique, and it shows how skilled Cooper is with the firearm. He is so skilled that he can make very intentional, precise shots, all while hip-firing, which may seem impossible, but it is possible if you're a gunslinging master. This guy had over 200 years to practice, so it seems pretty reasonable if you ask me. This guy is very clearly a max-level VATS build. He's got 10 agility, 10 perception, and 10 luck. But at the same time, this supposed grizzled veteran makes a rookie mistake where he keeps spamming the trigger after the gun is empty. It's almost as if he's surprised that he's out of ammunition. Of course, a real expert would be very aware of when their gun is empty, and they wouldn't waste any time trying to make a dramatic scene out of it. But of course, this is Hollywood, so this shot was specifically made for the sake of being dramatic. Another classic Hollywood trope is the unnecessary cocking of hammers. In this scene, Cooper is holding Lucy at gunpoint, with the hammer cocked and ready to go. All he has to do is pull the trigger, and boom, Lucy is dead. But as soon as Maximus starts sprinting toward Lucy, the hammer resets by itself, so Cooper has to pull it again, thus giving Maximus enough time to do a Mr. President get down move. Hollywood loves doing this move a lot. Even if the gun is already cocked and loaded, they'll have the actor cock the gun again, simply for dramatic effect. I also find it really hard to believe that these rounds weren't able to penetrate Maximus's power armor, when Cooper could one-shot other power armor dudes with no problem. When he's shooting at Maximus, the rounds bounce off like BBs and they don't explode. But when he shoots at other knights, they die in one hit. Well, apparently, it's because he's shooting specifically at a weak point in the welding under the chest plate, which is honestly just total made-up bullshit. Power armor never had this weakness, not until the writers needed it. And besides, this round looks like it could penetrate power armor head on, no weak point necessary. Don't get me wrong, power armor is indeed very strong. It can easily deflect all forms of small arms fire, but it's not quite as strong as a literal tank. The steel plating isn't that thick, so it's still vulnerable to larger rounds like 50 BMG. A direct hit from a rocket or any kind of anti-material round would absolutely go right through power armor. And this here is a 50 caliber rocket gun with an explosive projectile. Cooper even has a special armor-penetrating variant. So yes, these rounds would most certainly be able to penetrate power armor. The whole welding weak point thing is just another example of plot armor. The writers simply needed an excuse to keep Maximus alive during his fight with Cooper. At the end of the day, I do like the concept of this revolver. It's kinda goofy and a little bit cursed, but also very badass at the same time. It actually fits pretty dang good into the world of Fallout. So, great concept, but terrible execution. Because like I said, it's completely non-functional, and they very clearly didn't put a single ounce of research into how gyrojets work. If I were being 100% serious, I'd just give it one bottle cap and call it a day. Ugh, I'm fucking tired. But it's so hilariously bad that it also belongs in the legendary meme tier. The other gun that we see Cooper use is a sawn-off lever action, which is referred to as the Mare's leg. Mare's leg is a general term. It can refer to any sawn-off lever gun. So, to be more specific, this is a Winchester 1873. I don't have anything bad to say about this gun. It is a real gun after all, so there's nothing wrong with it. The only thing wrong here is that Cooper, the supposed gunslinging master, has no clue which ammunition to reload it with. He pulls out this big fat cartridge, but it's clearly way bigger than what the gun is actually chambered for. So he just fumbles around with it and he pretends to reload the gun before the camera cuts to the next scene. To be fair, this reload animation is very accurate to the games. It looks like they ported that shit straight from Fallout 3. But in all seriousness, it's just lazy for them to completely ignore reloads. We never see a single reload throughout the entire show. The camera always cuts to the next scene instead, probably because nobody on set knows how to reload a gun. And look, I don't expect every actor to become the next John Wick, but please, at the very least, just use the firearm properly. Especially if that character is supposed to be a skilled gunslinger. Otherwise, it kind of ruins the whole facade. It just makes him look like a total poser LARPing in cowboy clothes. So, like I said, the gun itself is fine. Normally, it would get a perfect rating, but the fact that Mr. Welding Goggles doesn't know how to use it is what keeps it from being S tier. The best rating I can do is 4 bottle caps and an A tier placement. Okay, now it's about time for the handmade guns. They don't get too much screen time, but from what we do see, they look fairly decent. Far better than the god-awful pipe guns from Fallout 4, that's for sure. You see, in Fallout 4, the pipe guns are literal piles of trash that don't even make an attempt to be functional. Mostly because the magazine doesn't feed into the chamber. So I'm really glad to see they completely tossed out those designs and made something new. This time around, they do have a proper magazine placement, so they could be functional. It's kind of hard to say for sure, since they're only shown for brief moments. But hey, at the very least, they do look like guns. Really, the main thing I don't like here is that every handmade gun we see is semi-automatic and magazine-fed. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but the vast majority of people in the wasteland wouldn't have the gunsmithing knowledge required to make them. When it comes to handmade guns, the simplest type to make is a single-shot pipe. No fancy moving parts, no magazine, you don't even need a trigger, just a shotgun shell and a pipe. It's so simple that even a 1 intelligence build can make it. Seriously, guns don't have to be complicated. The main objective is to make it go boom. Everything else is 100% optional. The more moving parts you start adding, the more complicated it gets. Only an expert gunsmith could handcraft an automatic magazine-fed SMG and have it be, somewhat reliable. As for the average Joe, not so much. Simple one-shot pipe guns would be the most common in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, so the fact that we don't see any in Fallout is kind of disappointing, nor is it very characteristic for the setting. Of course, automatic handmade guns would still be present, just not so overwhelmingly prevalent. When it comes to this rifle specifically, well, it's kind of dumb how the barrel is made out of copper. Compared to steel, copper has a very low melting point, so this barrel would overheat and melt like cheese. It could still work, but there's no reason to use a copper pipe as a barrel, when steel is more common and more durable. The goofiest handmade design that really stuck out to me is this one, which has 2 magazines placed in a V-like shape. I think it goes without saying, but this is extremely atypical. The only gun to have this is the Burton light machine rifle, which is a really obscure gun from the early 1900s. Some random settler in the wasteland basing their handmade design off an extremely obscure early 1900s prototype makes 0 sense. even if it's pure coincidence. The complexity of this design is not worth all the trouble. As for the sketchy doctor's rifle, it looks pretty decent. He even added on a rail system with some kind of improvised sight made from a big nut, so that's pretty funny. But of course, the main problem here is that he went overboard with the duct tape. It looks like he taped right over the bolt and the ejection port, so this gun would be guaranteed to jam. In the end, I'm still pleasantly surprised by the handmade guns in the show. There is a lot of missed potential, and a couple goofy design choices, but I will give them some credit for being way better than the trash guns in Fallout 4. As a whole, I'd say the handmade guns are worthy of 2 bottle caps. They get a spot in C tier. When it comes to the rest of the real-life guns in the show, well, most of them are treated as background props, so I don't see a reason to review all of them in depth. But one gun, or 2 guns that really stuck out to me is the twin M240. Wow, what a cameo. I was not expecting them to include this gun, cause I've never seen it in a piece of media before, so I must say, it is very cool to see it here. I do think it's kind of funny how this guy is trying to use it as an anti-aircraft gun to shoot down vertebrates though. Sorry dude, but 7.62 is not very optimal for taking down aircraft. You should probably use a 50 cal instead. This gun here is meant for infantry, but I guess it's better than nothing. To be fair, the show does reflect how ineffective it is against the vertebrates. The bullets don't damage them at all, and the guy manning the gun gets immediately domed. Yep, that's exactly how that situation would play out. It's too bad we only get to see this gun for one scene, but you know what? I'll give it 5 bottle caps and an S tier rating, simply because it's cool to see it. When it comes to the NCR's arsenal, we see them using a bunch of real-life guns, such as the BAR, the RPD, the Thompson, the PPSH, the M1 carbine, the grease gun, and the FAL. There's nothing wrong with these guns, seeing as they're all real, and all very cool. It may seem kind of odd to see the RPD and PPSH and FAL specifically, seeing as they're foreign-made guns, but there is some reasoning for them being here. In Fallout 3, a whole bunch of Chinese assault rifles were smuggled into the States by commie spies, so it's reasonable to assume they would do the same thing with other commie guns. As for the FAL, well, there is no deep lore explaining why it's here, but it is in Fallout 2 and Fallout Tactics, so there is precedence for its presence. The FAL was never adopted by the US in our timeline, but perhaps in the world of Fallout, the US eventually did get around to adopting it to some capacity. It still feels kind of odd to see so many RPDs. Like, it shouldn't be this common. Either way, I can really appreciate that they made sure all of the NCR soldiers were using only real guns. I was kind of worried they would make them use the clown guns from Fallout 4. So really, the only thing wrong with the NCR's arsenal is that there is not a single sighting of their main service rifle, the M16. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. It is their standard issue infantry rifle. This gun should be all over the place, and yet we don't see a single one of them. I really don't see why the showrunners would completely ignore it, unless they're a bunch of liberals that think AR-15 is bad. I bet that Bethesda doesn't want it in the show either, because they completely ignored it in their 2 previous games. The AR-15 is America's rifle. It is by far the most popular and widespread rifle in the States, so it absolutely needs to be in Fallout. For them to completely ignore it is just plain disrespectful. Honestly, it feels like a communist spy deliberately left it out. So for the absence of the service rifle, I'll give them -5 bottle caps and an Abyss tier rating. There's a bunch of other real-life guns that were shown very briefly, such as the Colt Single Action, the Colt Navy, the Ruger Mark II, the M14, the Mini 14, the Browning M2, the Browning 1919, and the Browning Auto 5. I think that's all of them. All of them are great choices to include in the show. The only thing wrong here is that they don't get enough screen time. It's kinda hard to give them a fair rating because of how little they're shown, but I'll just give them 5 bottle caps and an S tier placement in the hopes that we get to see them more in Season 2. When it comes to the energy weapons, well, we do see some laser and plasma guns, but most are hiding in the background and are never used. Seriously, not a single energy weapon is fired throughout the entire show. Like what, did these guys not have the budget to animate laser beams on the screen? Did they think it would look too, Star Warsy or something? Fallout with no energy weapons is like an angel with no wings. And the fact that the Brotherhood doesn't have a single energy weapon is really dumb, because they're known for hoarding energy weapons. But of course, they wanted them to use the god-awful Fallout 4 Assault My Eyes rifle instead. So, for the lack of energy weapons, they get 0 bottle caps and an F tier rating. The only reason why it's not a Biz tier is because they, at the very least, acknowledge their existence. Hopefully, we actually get to see them being used in Season 2. And that brings us back full circle to the most cursed gun of them all, the forbidden Fallout 4 assault rifle. I've already reviewed this gun twice and beat it to death, but you know what? I'll sum it up one more time for anyone who hasn't seen my previous videos. Really, the biggest issue with this gun is that it's butt ugly, and they didn't even name it properly. It's referred to as an assault rifle, but for an assault rifle, it is morbidly obese. It's built exactly like a bloated airship. The only reason why Bethesda made this gun is solely because they think it suits their goofy cartoon art style. Like, sure, it does match really good with the Pridwin. It's almost indistinguishable from it. But really, this goofy-looking steampunk gun would fit much better into BioShock Infinite. You see, this gun is based on heavy machine guns from World War I, specifically the Lewis and the Maxim, but it also has furniture from the M249, so that's quite the cursed combination. The funniest part about this gun is that it has circulation tubes meant for water cooling, but also the air cooling radiator from the Lewis gun, so this gun is somehow both water-cooled and air-cooled at the same time, which obviously isn't possible. You can't jack both of them. Even if they made up their mind and made this gun functional, it still wouldn't make any sense. This gun was designed to be used with power armor, but power armor was made to wield big-ass 50 cal machine guns, not 5.56 assault rifles. I mean, sure, you can still use low-caliber guns with power armor, but what I'm saying is that there is zero reason to specifically design a weapon around power armor, only for it to be an extremely obese 5.56 assault rifle. You might as well just use an M16. Even if they correctly chambered it for 50 cal, there is still no reason for this gun to exist, because it's already rendered obsolete by the M2 Browning. If they just had them use an old salvaged Lewis gun, then it would be fine. But this is supposed to be a futuristic pre-war machine gun from the 2070s, and yet it's using outdated technology from the early 1900s. Those designs were later replaced by the M2, because it's simply better. So they're evolving alright, just backwards. If you need a heavy machine gun for power armor, it's gonna be the M2. That should be a no-brainer. The dumbest part about all of this is that the M2 is in the show, but it's only hidden in the background and never used. Like, come on, man, it was right there! But of course, Bethesda would rather shove this big truck muffler in our face, because they think it's cool and unique. But honestly, this inbred hunk of scrap needs to get retconned. Everyone in the Fallout community hates it, and yet, it seems like Bethesda wants it to be the poster boy of Fallout guns. They reused it for Fallout 76, and here in the show, it's the only gun to make an appearance in every single episode. They are subconsciously conditioning us, through consistent exposure, to accept this thing as the face of Fallout guns. But frankly, I will not stand for it. I will not rest easy until this gun is officially deleted from the annals of Fallout history. But okay, when it comes to how it looks in the show, well, I can appreciate that they depicted it as a heavy machine gun meant for power armor, rather than some lame-ass oversized assault rifle. They scaled up its size, and it sounds much beefier. That implies this gun would be using a much bigger and more powerful round, but it doesn't look like this magazine is quite big enough to support 50 BMG. Frankly, I can't tell what exactly it's chambered for, because as usual, the editor forgot to make it eject casings. At least it always comes with a big drum mag instead of a 30-round stick, so it would be capable of serving the machine gun role properly. The Brotherhood Knights use it for suppressive fire, and to mow down anyone who gets in the way, as they should. But I don't see why they added on a sniper scope if they're always hip-firing it. That just seems kind of useless. Maybe they did it simply to increase the accuracy stat. By far, my favorite part in the whole show was when the Yaoguai destroyed it in a single bite. This Yaoguai honestly did nothing wrong. He's my hero for destroying the Fallout 4 assault rifle. Well, it didn't necessarily destroy the whole gun though. All this bear did was chomp down on the barrel, thus illegally modifying it into an SBR. I'm surprised the ATF didn't immediately show up and burn down the whole forest to confiscate it. But seriously, Knight Titus didn't have to throw away the gun. It would still fire, even if the barrel is broken. Probably. I don't know, he should have at least tried. But of course, these guys in Hollywood probably think that if you saw down a barrel, it destroys the whole gun, when really, all it does is get you a felony charge. Although I hate this gun with a burning passion, I do have to admit, it is ever so slightly better here in the show when compared to its in-game counterpart. So you know what? I'm upgrading the Fallout 4 assault rifle to F tier. It's still not worthy of any bottle caps, but that's certainly better than the negative rating it had before. So there you go. That's everything wrong with the guns in the Fallout show. In the end, I suppose the show did a much better job than Fallout 4. I can appreciate that they left out the majority of cartoon guns and favored a lot more real guns this time around. Really, the main guns dragging down this list are the 10mm pistol and the Fallout 4 assault rifle. Those are the main two guns that need to be retconned. Everything else can be fixed and adjusted though, so I'll let them stay. Anyway, that's all I got for this video. As always, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, and let me know if there's anything I missed or which guns I should cover next. I'm going to bed now. It's 3 a.m. Good night. Before we go, I want to thank WARTHUNDER for sponsoring the channel. Their support is what allows me to make these awesome videos. And remember, y'all can use my link in the description to download WARTHUNDER for free and receive a sweet bonus pack.